because if a patient had got a mental illness that required admission to hospital, the patient normally admitted, undressed, placed in bed, and was treated as though they had a physical illness.
This is Harold Shipman, who is also known as Dr. Death. He is considered to be one of the most prolific serial killers in modern history, with an estimated 250 victims over roughly 30 years.
Harold Shipman, often called Dr. Death, is one of the most chilling figures in criminal history, not because he fit the stereotypical image of a violent killer, but because he blended so seamlessly into the trust and intimacy of everyday life. A trusted family doctor who carried the weight of authority, knowledge, and care, and yet beneath that facade was a calculating murderer whose actions shocked the medical community and the world at large. Born in Nottingham, England, in 1946, Harold Frederick Shipman grew up as the second of 4 children in a working-class household, and from an early age, he was described as intelligent, quiet, and introverted, with an especially close bond to his mother, Vera. Vera Shipman's battle with lung cancer would shape much of Harold's view of medicine. As a teenager, he watched doctors administer morphine to ease her pain, and this moment, whether it planted a fascination with control over life and death or simply revealed to him the quiet power of narcotics, would later become chillingly significant. Shipman excelled academically, particularly in sciences, and pursued medicine at Leeds School of Medicine, where he qualified in 1970. He married his childhood sweetheart, Primrose, and they had 4 children, appearing to lead a picture-perfect life. But beneath this normalcy, there were already signs of strain and secrecy. In 1975, working as a young general practitioner, Shipman was caught forging prescriptions to feed a personal addiction to pethidine, an opioid. He underwent rehabilitation and managed to rebuild his career, an early example of how adept he was at hiding transgressions and manipulating appearances. Over the next 2 decades, Shipman cultivated a reputation as a dependable, if somewhat aloof, doctor in the towns of Todmorden and Hyde, Greater Manchester. Elderly patients trusted him implicitly, often seeing him not only as a physician, but as a confidant. Many of these women were found dead in their homes, often sitting fully clothed in chairs, a strange but largely unexamined detail at the time. Death certificates were signed, cremations approved, families comforted, and life moved on. The sheer audacity of the crimes lay in their subtlety. Unlike many serial killers, there was no chaos, no dramatic violence, just a quiet, lethal injection of diamorphine, the same drug he had seen comfort his dying mother, delivered with the authority of a medical professional. It is estimated that he began killing as early as 1972, and by the time suspicions truly surfaced in the late 1990s, he had likely claimed more than 200 lives. The breakthrough came not from forensic genius, but from human observation. In 1998, a local undertaker, Deborah Massey, and a fellow doctor, Susan Booth, began to notice patterns. Too many deaths among Shipman's patients, too many elderly women, too many cremation requests, and the oddity of the victims' positions. They raised concerns, prompting an initial but poorly conducted police inquiry, which failed to uncover concrete evidence. Shipman's calm, confident demeanor and the absence of overt evidence allowed him to continue killing even after that scrutiny. The final unraveling began with the death of 81-year-old Kathleen Grundy, a wealthy widow who had been in good health before her sudden passing. Grundy's daughter, a lawyer named Angela Woodruff, grew suspicious when she discovered a new will, typed and naming Shipman as sole beneficiary. Woodruff knew her mother too well to believe this, and she went to the police. Because Grundy had been buried rather than cremated, an autopsy was performed, revealing lethal levels of diamorphine. This single act of oversight by Shipman, targeting a woman whose body could still speak, became his undoing. Police expanded the investigation, exhuming bodies and reviewing medical records, uncovering a horrifying pattern of overdoses, falsified records, and a callousness that defied belief. In January 2000, Shipman was tried for the murders of 15 women and the forgery of Grundy's will. The trial painted him as cold, clinical, and without remorse. Despite overwhelming evidence, he never admitted guilt. On January 31, 2000, he was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to life imprisonment with the recommendation that he never be released. The inquiry that followed, known as the Shipman Inquiry, concluded that he likely killed at least 218 patients, though some estimates are as high as 250, making him one of the most prolific serial killers in history. The case sent shockwaves through the UK, prompting massive changes in medical oversight, prescription monitoring, and death certification practices. What made Shipman's crimes particularly unsettling was the betrayal of trust. The idea that someone who embodied safety and care could so ruthlessly exploit that role. His victims were often vulnerable, elderly women, whose deaths might have been overlooked as natural, making him uniquely difficult to detect. Shipman remained unrepentant until the end, maintaining his innocence even as evidence mounted. On January 13, 2004, at the age of 57, he was found hanged in his cell at Wakefield Prison, his suicide closing the final chapter on a man who had spent his life playing God. Yet, the ripples of his actions endure. Families left without answers, a medical system forced to confront its blind spots, and a society still haunted by the question of why a doctor, someone sworn to heal, chose instead to kill. His story is a chilling reminder of how power, trust, and secrecy can combine to create a perfect cover for unimaginable acts.
How did they say you claimed that you did it?
I kind of poisoned them.
Did you say you didn't poison them?
I didn't.
At the time you were convicted, was there a lot of talk in the newspapers about that conviction?
Yes.
Did they say that?
All these said all kinds of nice
You
things.
think they were right?
Not
This is Belle Gunness, a woman who created a farm for killing people. Belle Gunness was the most prolific female serial killer in United States' history.
Belle Gunness, remembered as the Lady Bluebeard or the Black Widow of Laporte, was not the type of killer that lurked in the shadows or struck at random. Instead, she built a facade of domesticity and prosperity, turning her quiet Midwestern farmhouse into a death trap for those who trusted her most. And her story remains one of the most shocking and calculated murder sprees ever committed by a woman in American history. Born Brynhild Paulsdottir Sturse in 1859 in Selbu, Norway. She grew up in a poor but hard-working family, known to be tough, resourceful, and ambitious, qualities that would serve her well, but also doom those who crossed her path. In 1881, seeking a better life, she emigrated to the United States, adopting the name Belle and settling in Chicago, where she married Mads Sorensen. The marriage seemed stable on the surface, but tragedy seemed to follow Belle. 2 Sorensen homes burned down under suspicious circumstances, and the couple collected insurance payouts. Sorensen himself died suddenly on the same day. The 2 of his life insurance policies overlapped, with Belle conveniently as the beneficiary. The cause of death was ruled heart failure, but whispers of poisoning circulated. Undeterred, and now financially secure, Belle moved to LaPorte, Indiana, purchasing a farm and marrying Peter Gunness, a butcher and widower. Within a week of marriage, Peter's infant daughter died under mysterious conditions, and soon after, Peter himself suffered a fatal accident when a meat grinder allegedly fell on his head. The incident raised eyebrows, but Belle's calm explanation satisfied authorities at the time. Alone again, but now financially comfortable, Belle became a local curiosity, a large, strong woman known for her stern demeanor, but also for her independence and success. Yet behind the stoic farmer's exterior, Belle was plotting a scheme as audacious as it was deadly. She began placing personal ads in Norwegian-language newspapers and Midwest publications, seeking a man of means to join her on her farm. Lonely, hard-working immigrants responded in droves, bringing with them savings, jewelry, and the hope of love or partnership. They were welcomed warmly, but neighbors noticed that these men often vanished soon after arrival. Belle always had plausible explanations. Some returned home, Others went west. Others simply moved on. Few suspected that they were meeting a far darker fate. Bell's method was simple but effective. Suitors were asked to bring all their assets, often liquidated into cash, to prove their commitment. Once on the farm, they were wined and dined, then likely drugged, bludgeoned, or poisoned, their bodies dragged to the hog pen or the cellar, dismembered, and buried in shallow graves or covered in quicklime. Over time, Bell became increasingly bold, targeting not only suitors but also foster children and farmhands who might inconvenience her. Her greed seemed boundless. Life insurance policies and hard cash fueled her killings. By the early 1900s, her reputation as a successful but lonely farmer had drawn many to her door. But suspicion finally caught up with her when a former suitor's brother, Asla Helgelien, became determined to find out what happened to his sibling, Andrew. His inquiries in 1908 coincided with a catastrophic event. Bell's farmhouse caught fire on April 28, 1908. Amid the smoldering ruins, investigators found the bodies of 3 children and a decapitated adult female, believed at first to be Bell. The town was horrified, but as investigators dug deeper, literally, the farm began to yield its grisly secrets. Dozens of bodies and body parts were uncovered, some burned, some decomposed, many belonging to men who had answered Bell's ads. Estimates of her victims range from 14 to over 40, though the exact number remains uncertain. The adult female body found in the house raised immediate questions. Neighbors noted that it was shorter and lighter than Bell, and the missing head prevented positive identification. Did Bell perish in her own fire, or did she stage her death and escape? The evidence was tantalizingly ambiguous. Some believed Bell killed her children, set the fire, and died. Others believed she murdered a housekeeper or an unknown woman to fake her death. Over the years, there were alleged sightings of Bell in various states, but none confirmed. What remains clear is that Belle Gunness was far from the lonely, love-seeking widow she portrayed. She was calculating, cold, and capable of extraordinary deception. Her killings were motivated by greed and control, exploiting the trust and vulnerability of those seeking companionship. She turned the quintessential American dream, a farm, a family, prosperity, into a nightmare. Even in death, her legend grew, inspiring books, films, and speculation about how a woman in an era that often underestimated female cunning could orchestrate such a lethal enterprise. The Laporte farm, once a picture of rural charm, became synonymous with horror, its soil literally hiding the secrets of Bell's ambition. Today, Belle Gunness remains a reminder that evil does not always come with warning signs or fit stereotypes. It can be cloaked in respectability. It can place ads in newspapers. It can cook a warm meal and smile as it calculates your worth in dollars and cents. Whether she died in 1908 or lived under another name, the fact remains. Belle Gunness built her fortune and her infamy on the bones of those who trusted her, and she has gone down in history as one of the most chilling predators ever to wear the mask of domesticity.
You work all night at that? I should think you have it.
That's right.
What would you do with the sexual part? One was painted different.
Oh, that one, when they died, and they took the table. They didn't like,
Who did you start?
like I say, not before years.
So there's a bunch of photographers from the newspaper who want to take a picture. You want to?
Edward Theodore Gein, also known as the Butcher of Plainfield, was an American murderer, suspected serial killer, and body snatcher.
Ed Gein, whose name would become synonymous with horror itself, was not the prolific killer that some of his contemporaries were, but the sheer depravity of his crimes made him one of the most infamous figures in American criminal history, inspiring some of the most chilling characters in film and literature, including Norman Bates in Psycho, Leatherface in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Buffalo Bill in The Silence of the Lambs. Born Edward Theodore Gein on August 27, 1906, in La Crosse County, Wisconsin, He was the second son of George and Augusta Gain, a family defined by dysfunction and repression. Augusta, a domineering and fanatically religious woman, taught her sons that the world was full of sin, that women, except herself, were evil, and that strict discipline and moral purity were the only paths to salvation. George, an alcoholic, was largely ineffectual, and the household was isolated, bleak, and suffocating. Ed and his older brother Henry were kept away from peers, taught to mistrust outsiders, and forced to endure Augusta's constant sermons. Despite this oppressive environment, Ed reportedly idolized his mother, developing an unhealthy attachment to her that would shape his psyche forever. When the family moved to a farm in Plainfield, Wisconsin, their isolation deepened. Ed was a shy, socially awkward boy, bullied at school, but mechanically inclined and obedient to a fault. The death of his father in 1940 left the family even more insular. Henry began to challenge Augusta's teachings, worrying about Ed's dependence on her. And in 1944, Henry died under mysterious circumstances during a brush fire on the property. Though the death was ruled accidental, some believed Ed had a hand in it. Then, in 1945, Augusta died, and for Ed, this was catastrophic. Alone for the first time, he retreated into himself, preserving parts of the farmhouse as shrines to his M.O. there, while letting other areas decay. He boarded up her bedroom and sitting room, keeping them pristine, while the rest of the house became cluttered and filthy. It was during this time of isolation that Ed's inner world darkened. Fascinated by anatomy, death, and women, he began reading pulp magazines and medical books about cannibalism and Nazi atrocities, fueling disturbing fantasies. His fixation on his mother and hatred for other women grew, and he started visiting local cemeteries, digging up freshly buried bodies, mostly women who reminded him of Augusta. From these corpses, he would take skin, bones, and organs, crafting grotesque trophies and items of furniture, chairs upholstered with human skin, bowls made of skulls, a belt made of nipples, masks and garments, created from flayed flesh. Even a woman's suit that he would reportedly wear, perhaps in some effort to become his mother or inhabit her power. For years, these acts remained hidden, as Plainfield was a small, trusting town, and Ed was seen as an odd but harmless handyman who helped neighbors with chores. That illusion shattered on November 16, 1957, when Bernice Worden, the owner of the local hardware store, disappeared. Her son, Frank Worden, the town's deputy sheriff, noticed that the store register showed Ed had been there the morning of her disappearance, buying antifreeze. Investigators obtained a warrant and went to Gaines' farmhouse, unaware of the nightmare awaiting them. Inside, they found Bernice's decapitated body hanging upside down in a shed, gutted like game. Further searches revealed the unimaginable: organs in jars, skulls on bedposts, masks of human skin, a box of vulvas, a lampshade made of human flesh. Some remains were identified as belonging to missing women, though many were stolen from graves rather than victims of murder. Ultimately, Ed confessed to killing 2 women, Bernice Worden and tavern owner Mary Hogan, though suspicions persist that there may have been more. The evidence of his grave robbing was undeniable. In interviews, Gaines seemed detached, almost childlike, as if he did not fully grasp the horror of his actions, describing them matter-of-factly. His calmness and lack of overt malice made the revelations even more disturbing, suggesting a deep psychological disconnection. Gaines was declared legally insane and unfit to stand trial initially. He was committed to a mental hospital. In 1968, he was found competent, tried for the murder of Bernice Worden, and convicted but found not guilty by reason of insanity. He spent the rest of his life in psychiatric institutions, where he was reportedly a model patient, polite and compliant, far removed from the grotesque acts that defined his legacy. He died of respiratory failure on July 26, 1984, at the age of 77, but his legend lived on. The Gain farmhouse, which had become a macabre attraction, burned down in 1958 under suspicious circumstances, perhaps an act of communal catharsis. The artifacts seized from his home were destroyed or kept by authorities, though some pieces, like his truck, were later auctioned off. What makes Ed Gein's case so compelling is not the body count, comparatively low for a serial killer, but the psychological abyss it revealed. A man warped by isolation, obsession, and grief, who blurred the line between life and death, memory and flesh. His crimes stripped away the veneer of normalcy in rural America and exposed a mind that could turn love into desecration. Even decades later, his story chills because it reminds us that horror does not always come from a shadowy stranger, but can live quietly on a lonely farm, behind boarded-up windows, in the hands of someone who looks like your neighbor. Ed Gein remains a figure of fascination and fear, a name that still evokes the raw, unsettling question: how far can a human mind twist before it unravels completely?